these are kind of the three lenses I think a lot of people should own, which is a 35, an 85, and a 50. But why would you want to own each one of these? So you've clicked on this video, you know what this is about. These are the 3 prime lenses I completely suggest anyone who wants to do photography or video work to kind of start off with and invest in their prime collection. So let's start off. Why would you want prime lenses versus, let's say, a Trinity set of lenses, right? So a 24-70 or a 70-200 or even a 14-24. Why would you want, primes versus, let's say, the very versatile zoom lenses? So let's actually kind of cover some of the main reasons why I suggest these lenses. First off, optical quality. For most cases when you're working with primes, it's very easy to notice that there'll be a huge jump in photo quality as well as the optical quality. What do I mean by that? There'll be a lot of less vignetting or distortion when you're actually using these. And what's really great about them is because there's a lot less glass in them, it's actually a lot smaller, which kind of brings me into my second point, that having a few primes is actually a lot better in some cases than bringing in a big boy like this. So when you actually want to compare just the size alone, this is a 70-200, here's a 50, here's a 35 and an 80. The size difference between some of these lenses, even without the lens hood, is quite noticeable. So if you want to get really great quality image, that's mainly one of the reasons why you want to have, let's say, like a set of primes. But the other main reason why you might actually want to use a prime is actually for that size and aperture. The aperture is essentially how wide the lens is, so you'll actually notice that a lot of these, such as an F number right here, and what that means is it's how wide and how much light capabilities the lens will actually have. So those are kind of the main reasons why I suggest everyone should own, for many reasons, but some of the subtle reasons why you may want to opt to primes versus, let's say, zoom lenses. As I said in the beginning of the video, each one of these lenses have their strengths and each characteristic as to why I think they're really great to own. There's no particular order, I think, that anyone should own these. I just think that if you're starting to build out a kit of prime lenses to do portrait work, video work, or anything of the sort, having one of each of these focal lengths is probably the best and most affordable option out there. So, in no particular order, let's start with probably one of my favorite focal lengths right now, which is actually the 35. And this particular model of the Nikon Z lineup is actually the 35 1.8S lens. And the reason I really like this particular focal length is actually for how wide it is. And working with a 35mm, you'll actually notice that you don't get a lot of distortion, but what's really great about it is that it's wide enough to actually showcase an environment if you're going to be doing portrait work with this lens. So first reason. Second reason is mainly because it's not going to go any wider, like let's say a 20 or 24 or even a 14mm lens, you're actually not going to notice a lot of weird vignetting or a lot of weird distortion happening to the faces, which you could actually notice what happens when you're actually working with a lot of the wider lenses. You'll have to do a lot of post-production, but you'll also notice that the face is just doesn't seem quite right. It seems a little off. And what I really like about this particular lens is that this 35 from Nikon has a really good close-up range. It's almost a macro lens in some cases where you don't have to focus very far to actually get really good close-ups. So you could actually get close-ups of the face. If you want to get a little closer to your subject, if you want to get closer to your subject, you could actually get pretty decent distance using this lens. Let's talk about my other really widely used lens, I would say. So this is actually the Nikon 85 1.8Z lineup. And I really like an 85, mainly because it's really great at isolating the subject. But what I like about it is actually the bokeh it produces. It produces a very soft fall off when you're actually taking photos of your subject. And as you can see, the roll off is just beautiful. It's very sharp when you're focusing on your subject, and it doesn't give too much distraction, if you will, on the focal range, because it's really isolating your subject. Really great telephoto range, I would say, if you want to get more focus of your subject. And the other reason I really like this is I've heard debates as to why this is actually the better focal range as compared to our next explained, is that it kind of mimics the human eye very well. So I've heard from different sources that, the human eye kind of replicates anywhere from 55 to 75, and the most common one I actually hear is actually the 75 range. So this is probably the closest prime focal length you could actually get in most cases to actually replicate what your eye sees, so the images when you're photographing is actually very pleasing to the eye. So the last lens I actually recommend is the 50mm 1.8. Some people call it the nifty 50 for a couple different reasons. I really like this one, mainly because it has a good blend between a 35mm and an 85mm. It's almost that sweet spot in between where it's really good at isolating the subject, but it's still good enough to do close-up or close enough portraits for your subject. What I also do like is when you're actually doing a lot of portraits, it actually does blend the background very well as well. In most cases, you could order a lot of these used nifty 50s, and they're usually a lot smaller. Nikon, for some reason, on their Z lineup, likes to make very big, or as you can see, matching sets of primes here. So as you can see, a lot of these primes are roughly about the same size, and them being a 1.8 and they're the aperture, they're pretty light as well. So if you want to compare to owning a 200 to 70, you could actually almost stack these guys, but the weight difference when carrying the zoom is significant. And these are kind of my choice as to what lenses people should invest in when they're actually working with primes. So a couple honorable mentions though, for, I guess you could say, notable mentions for prime lenses as well would be a 105. I know a lot of people kind of work and promote the 105 range to kind of be the king of portraits, I suppose, just because it's a good focal distance, but a lot of older 105s are fairly large and they're very heavy as well. Another notable lens I would actually suggest people to get if they do have the budget for it is actually a 135mm f1.8, and Nikon released the not too long ago Plena actually for this very reason, that it has become the bokeh and soft roll-off king, if you will, of portraits, which haven't tested it myself, but that is a heavy lens and quite honestly a very overpriced lens for what you're actually going to be getting. So anyway, these are kind of my go-to film portrait lenses of choice. I use these fairly often for various reasons, but my go-to for, let's say, walking around lens is going to be a 35. An 85 is kind of my more desired choice, I would say, for portraits. But if I am able to carry both, I usually take both. But if I can't take either of these, then I usually just swap out and go with a 50mm. These are kind of my choices. What other choices would you recommend if someone had to, let's say, build out a three lens kit, if you will, for portraits alone? What would you guys go for? I don't know. Leave your comments down below. And until next time, let me know what you guys think, and yeah, I'll see you guys in the video next week. All right, take care.